The first duty of government is to protect our rights.
It's our job to maintain the proper role of government in what we were tasked to do.
If you really want to doge, this is how you doge. You don't vote for bad legislation that expands government. Thank you.
Now we're talking about taxpayer money, and we talk about accountability. It is their money. This isn't a government program we're actually spending on. We're actually giving it back to the people of Idaho.
There's other options for making our ballots more secure, such as using watermarks or putting holograms on the ballots.
And I think that that's what we need to look at more, is trying to get back to what we used to be, where our churches and our families took care of each other instead of relying on the state.
I asked the question rhetorically, if we gave them another $1 billion, they wouldn't be happy. Well, we've given them $2 more billion, and it's not enough.
We need to start making Idaho first. We need to start making America first.
Other states like Texas and Florida have enacted similar laws to address illegal immigration, both locally and in their communities. And Idaho has the right to protect itself when the federal government has failed to do that.
COVID presented us with quite the enigma. We didn't really know what it was or what to do, but that is no excuse to violate the rights of the citizens of the state of Idaho.
I say vote no on this and let the teachers teach and quit bringing in coaches to teach the teachers to teach, and let's get education going again in Idaho.
I don't know what's coming after this current administration for the feds, and we need this law because our federal laws on immigration have failed.
Mr. President, I think it's incumbent upon us to allow parents to use their hard-earned dollars to provide what's best for their children.
If I was looking at a business and I was looking at these figures, there would be heads rolling because this is unsustainable.
My concern is that the resilience of Idahoans who believe in self-reliance and self-responsibility will be eroded.
We need to be protecting our First Amendment rights, not inventing ways to slowly chip away at them.
The First Amendment and our freedom of religion, freedom of speech are our first liberties. They are so important. We don't have the rest without them.
Yeah, watch it.
Come on, guys.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to this special edition of Idaho Signal. Matt Edwards here. I am super thrilled to be back on the air. We are just a week away from the start of the 2026 Idaho legislative session, where we will be on daily, Monday through Friday. So be sure to bookmark us wherever you're watching us right now and return next week. So let's get rolling here. You hear systemic racism bandied about, and immediately the mind conjures some lecturing progressive claiming that every institution is secretly rigged against minorities through invisible biases. That's the modern script, right? But here in Idaho and 37 other states, we have a genuine documented case of systemic bigotry embedded right inside our own Constitution. It's called the Blaine Amendment. Now, before we get into it, let's go back to America and Idaho Territory back in the 19th century, okay? This was an overwhelmingly Protestant country, but we had waves of European immigrants, many Catholic, that flooded in, and to the Protestant majority, they posed an existential threat. Catholics weren't just different, they were dangerous, right? They were loyal to a foreign pope. Public schools back then weren't neutral either. They were steeped in Protestantism. There was mandatory King James Bible readings. There were Protestant hymns were being sung. There were lessons laced with anti-Catholic venom. Go back and look. It's fascinating to see. There were school children had textbooks where the Pope was seen as the Antichrist or the, quote, whore of Babylon, which was straight out of Revelation. So when Catholics began to refuse to send their children to those public schools, they started to build their own parochial schools. And then panic set in because no way should public dollars, which were already funding schools at the time, should they go touch these popish institutions. So enter James Blaine, a prominent Republican congressman and Speaker of the House from the state of Maine. In 1875, he proposed a federal constitutional amendment that would ban public funds from aiding any sectarian schools. And we say, quote, sectarian, because back then, sectarian was code for Catholic. Now, it sailed through the House overwhelmingly, but then it fell short in the Senate by just a narrow margin. Undeterred, Blaine and his allies pushed the idea on all the states and territories that were seeking admission to the Union. So Idaho, which was gearing up for statehood in 1890, they folded it into the Constitution here as Article 9, Section 5, basically saying no public money shall ever aid any church, sectarian society, or religious school. So this old Catholic, anti-Catholic bigotry, it passed by Protestant majorities, and it lives on today. Now, fast forward to today, times have changed, at least between Protestants and Catholics, largely. In America, things seem to have tempered down. You know, we have agreed to disagree on the whole grace through works thing, and the outright animosity has largely faded. But this law, it's now morphed into a blunt instrument, which is wielded by secular forces against all Christians. Consider what happened this year. Down in Middleton, Truth Family Bible Church was renting a space in a public charter school's gym for their Sunday services. They were renting it. There was simple community use. There was nothing extravagant. The same went for this outside music school that rented there as well. But when the charter schools sought public bonds for upgrades to their campus, state officials invoked the Blaine Amendment. Lawyers told the school that based on the Constitution, they must cancel the church's rental in order to receive the bond and do the upgrades. So the church got booted. The music program, however, it stayed. It was allowed to stay. So a federal judge recently, last year, ruled that this was blatant religious discrimination, a clear First Amendment violation. This is absurd, right? Take also the case of a homeschooling parents out in Caldwell. They chose some supplemental curriculum, which included practicing handwriting with Bible verses and math problems with religious references and all that jazz. And this curriculum came from options that aligned with state standards, and it was listed on the website by the government. But reimbursement through a public charter schools program, totally denied. It's too sectarian. Well, thanks a lot, Blaine. This provision's sweep is breathtaking. And though it's tucked in the education section, its broad language could bar basic services like police or fire protection for religious buildings where any education is going on. Former Supreme Court Justice Breyer once flagged that very hypothetical in Supreme Court arguments. It came up several times. Do we really let a church school burn because of this? Now, you may be watching this and laughing and thinking all of this is absurd. None of these things will ever happen. But as I was researching all of these different cases, I simply laughed out loud at one. It was Vitters versus the Washington School for the Blind, and it made it all the way to the Supreme Court. In this case, a legally blind man who wanted to become a pastor wasn't allowed to participate in a state-offered vocational rehab program because his goal was to become a pastor. The Supreme Court voted 9-0 in his favor. But this only happened after the state said no. Whoa, excuse me. The state said, no, you can't do that. Then 3 other lower courts also said no. And so he was stuck washing dishes in a medical lab as his case took years to make it to the Supreme Court. All he wanted to do with his life, a blind man, was become a pastor. And because of this, he was denied for years and stuck washing dishes. It's outrageous. It's pure bigotry. there was a family in Washington as well. I believe it was Washington, another Supreme Court case, whose deaf son was provided a sign language interpreter up until the 8th grade by the school board and what was called the Individuals with Disability Education Act. This was a government program that was set up. Now, you could agree or not agree on whether or not we should have these programs at all. But the fact is, these program was out there and it was being made available to these people with disabilities. So when the family decided to eventually send their son to a private Catholic school, the district decided, establishment of religion. This was the reason we can't continue this sign language interpreter gift. And so that was it. And so we went to court. And the court sided with the family, saying that the service at issue in the case is part of a general government program. It distributes benefits neutrally, and it's to aid any child qualifying as handicapped. So, and we're going to get into all of this. We got some great guests coming up, so we can explore some of these ridiculous cases. But it just kind of shows us, like, how heartless can we be? This relic of the 19th century, this Protestant prejudice against Catholics, is now being exploited to punish all believers. It's a perverse twist. And the defenders clinging to it today, they wrap themselves in this separation of church and state while enforcing the very bigotry that the clause was never meant to enable. So here we are facing real constitutional systemic discrimination. Not the invented kind, but one born out of outright religious animus. And it's still doing damage today. And it's long past time that we root it out. Joining me right now to get into all this is attorney Kate Hartley with the Pacific Justice Institute. She was the lawyer behind that very case that I cited with Truth Family Bible Church that was in the public charter school. Kate, welcome to the program. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Happy New Year.
Oh yes, Happy New Year. And what a new year it's going to be, because I am so fired up because of the fact that you won this case. And we'll get into the details of this case in a little bit. But I just want to kind of start from the beginning here when we're talking about, you know, the separation of church and state, right? I mean, this is like the guiding. It's like probably more famous quote in our country than "In God We Trust." It's almost like the slogan of our or the logo, whatever you call it, the motto of our country is not "In God We Trust." It's the separation of church and state. Can you kind of bring us back in time a little bit to the Establishment Clause, you know, the First Amendment, and what it says and what it was meant when it was originally written?
Yes, absolutely. So there are two religion clauses, as we say, in the First Amendment. And so, you know, the beginning of the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, which of course is referred to as the Establishment Clause. And it's followed by the Free Exercise Clause, which says, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And to start off, religious liberty was very important to our founders, and as reflected in the First Amendment here. And so the original intent of the Establishment Clause was actually to keep the government out of the church. It was to preserve the rights of the church to make their own decisions about how they wanted to worship, how they wanted to run things, how they wanted their religious practices to be without any interference from the government. Of course, over the years, as you were saying, that has morphed, unfortunately, to a belief that religion cannot be anywhere within government, and that we have to have, as you said, this strict separation between government function and religion. And that was not the original intent. It was actually to protect the church from the government, not the other way around. So that was the intent of the founders based on what they experienced in the countries that they came from.
Okay, great. So to be clear, this was and this was written in the federal Constitution. So this was barring the Congress, the federal Congress, from establishing a religion for the entire country. So when it came to the states, I'm remembering from my schooling days and from my grammar school days in high school that the original 13 states themselves, they basically kind of were establishing religions of their own within their borders. I mean, you had Pennsylvania was largely a Quaker state. I believe Maryland was largely a Catholic state. Can you kind of describe what that looked like? I mean, when we say, that was going on with those original states?
Sure. Originally, everything within the Bill of Rights, so this would be included, only applied to the federal government. So that was not extended to the states at the time. And so, yes, states were free to make those decisions for themselves. And the First Amendment only prevented the federal government, Congress specifically, from passing any laws that would require an establishment of religion. That certainly changed, later on, but at that time, you're correct, Matt. That's exactly how it worked.
Okay, so then, so if that's how it was, how did we get to where we are today? I keep hearing like, oh, well, we had the 14th Amendment that came about, and that was something that was going to then limit and put these limitations in here. So, I mean, can you walk us through that? What happened with the 14th Amendment?
Yeah, very broadly, the 14th Amendment came after the Civil War. And so that provided a number of individual rights. And essentially over time, what has happened is it's been interpreted that those rights afforded in the Bill of Rights actually also applied to states and even local governments. And so that is how that has extended to the states, which of course is different than originally when it was only applied to the federal government. So that was post-Civil War, 14th Amendment, and then over time that has been incorporated to the states.
So the 14th Amendment, I mean, is it fair to say that the 14th Amendment then just simply said, okay, all of the states have to adopt everything in the Bill of Rights or everything in the Constitution, or did it not? Or are people just extrapolating that?
It has been extrapolated. Yeah, the text of the 14th Amendment does not say that. So that these have been interpretations over time that have come about. And of course, depending on who you talk to, that's a good or bad thing. And they have certainly led to a number of significant extrapolations within case law. And so there are a number of Supreme Court justices over time that have not agreed with that. There's a current Supreme Court justice that does not agree, for example, the Establishment Clause should be applied to the states, it should still today only apply to the federal government and Congress establishing a religion. That is not a majority view, at least right now, but there's debate about that, definitely.
Well, then let me take it one step further. If the First Amendment Establishment Clause doesn't apply to the states, does that also mean that the First Amendment free speech section doesn't apply to the states either?
Well, and to be clear, all of these do apply under current interpretation.
Sure.
They do apply.
Sure.
I mean, so if you're asking my opinion about whether I think it should apply, the purpose of the 14th Amendment was to protect individual liberties. And so I believe, freedom of speech is an individual liberty that should apply to the states and local governments.
Well, I'm also, Kate, I'm also looking at the fact that most states, when you read the Declaration of Rights, like in Idaho, it repeats a lot of the things that are in the Bill of Rights, like when it comes to free speech or the self-defense, Second Amendment.
Correct.
So
exactly.
I mean, that's kind of like a roadmap for me that says when they were drafting the state constitutions, they knew well that the the stuff in the Bill of Rights only applied at the federal level. It didn't apply at the states. That's why
Correct.
they needed to write it inside their own constitution.
Absolutely. And most states have done exactly that. There is in most states something very similar to the First Amendment protections within state constitutions, and that also affords the state judicial system to interpret their own state constitutions potentially in a different way than the U.S. Supreme Court interprets the federal Constitution. And so, I mean, again, that's a whole states' rights issue that, again, people have varying opinions on, certainly. But that is potentially an advantage in a state, is that you can create those laws, obviously laws through the state constitution, and you also have your own judicial system that can potentially interpret them differently.
Well, it seems clear to me that that was the precedent. That was the original intent. The original precedent was states would come online, they'd form their own constitution, and because they liked what they saw in the Bill of Rights, they're like, well, we should have that too, because that only applies at the federal level. So when we go back to what you said earlier, we've had all this court precedents that have steered us away from that. Well, why isn't the precedent of our founding why doesn't that have more weight than what a few judges over time have interpreted? I mean, shouldn't that have more weight, the original intent?
I certainly believe so, and there are some current Supreme Court justices that absolutely agree with that, which is why the Supreme Court is trending in, again, in my opinion, the right direction with original interpretation, original intent, reading the actual text of the provision and its original intent to decide some of these cases. So there are more originalists on the Supreme Court now than there have been in quite some time. And so they are in some ways slowly undoing some of the damage that has been done in previous decades that have gotten pretty far away from original intent.
So, okay, so now we're here. We are where we're at, and it's going to take, we didn't get this way overnight. It's not going to unravel itself overnight, and especially with just in Idaho with this one program. But I'm kind of looking at trying to figure out some arguments, right? And we'll get into like some of the things that we can try and push back on when we hear the different arguments. But right now, it seems as though that we have a government. Or a society, because our government is made up of people who live in our society that have largely just bought in full bore with, the separation of church and state. And then we have to completely keep everything separate, or keep the government, or keep religion out of the government. But it's gone so far that it seems like the government has embraced atheism or secularism or agnostic, like all of those things that are just so anti-religion that it almost becomes a religion itself. I mean, couldn't a group of people come together and say, I don't want my money going towards all of these, atheist ideas and this worldview that denies, that denies people their religion and denies all of them from participating in society?
Absolutely. And, the fundamental principle when looking especially at the Establishment Clause is neutrality from the government. And so arguably, again, with all of this parroting of separation of church and state, at some point, pushing that as hard as it has been pushed actually can create a hostility towards religion. It is communicating to people that religion is bad. Religion is dangerous. We have to keep this completely away from anything related to the government. And that actually creates somewhat of a hostility towards religion, which violates the requirement for the government to be neutral towards religion. And the government cannot favor atheism. Atheism is still a belief system. They can't favor atheism over any other belief system. And so I agree with you that this is a huge problem, and it is, again, very far from original intent, and truly it's even far from more recent precedent that requires neutrality. And anytime that you are saying that, religion has to stay away, they have to be out of sight and out of mind, with anything the government does, I think that communicates to the population that religion is bad and dangerous, and that's obviously not neutral.
Right. Okay, Kate, we're going to show this mini documentary here in just a minute, and this is the case that you were the lawyer for. You were their lawyer, and so we'll come back to you on the other side of that documentary to get some more behind the scenes insight into how that case went down. So please stick around, folks. We're going to take a quick break. I do want to tell you about a brand new sponsor that we're going to have this season, and that is the American Smoke Company. You guys have got to check this out. Is my mic still on? Is my mic still on? Yeah. Okay, good. So these guys make smoked salts, and what they do is they get wood from all over the country, all American wood. Show the stuff with all the wood, and all the different woods have different aromas, and they smoke this Pacific Ocean sea salt, and they've got pecan, or pecan, however you want to say it, mesquite, apple, hickory, all these smoke salts, and you salt your meat with it, man. It's fantastic. So I'm super thrilled to have American Smoke Company as a sponsor for the program. You can go to americansmokeco.com, check out their supply, and order yourself some. We will be right back.
And that's exactly what happened. You want to pull the tape? You can pull the tape, because we now got video.
Idaho is the dirt under your fingernails after an honest day's work. Idaho is the hug around your neck when your daughter spells her first word. Idaho is the written word of the law, steadfast and impartial, guarding liberty for all. Idaho is the family rifle passed down, a legacy of protection and the right to stand firm. Idaho is the echo of your own voice, unshaken and free, standing tall among the world's silenced. Idaho is the home that's built to weather storms, not empty wallets. Idaho is the quiet trust between a patient and healer, unbroken and sacred. Idaho is the hymn carried by the Spirit, gathering neighbors together in faith and purpose. Idaho is the laughter around a campfire, a family's bond growing stronger with every word. Idaho is the pioneer's will, firm and clear. We govern ourselves, free and unbound. Idaho is what America was. Let's keep it that way. Ask your legislator to sign the Citizens Alliance of Idaho Pledge to preserve our shared values. We ride together.
Oh, yes. Very good. All right, folks. We're about to premiere this Idaho versus Christians mini documentary. So settle back. It's only about 6 minutes long. But we're going to introduce you here to Pastor Danny Stanmeyer. He is the pastor at Truth Family Bible Church in Middleton. And here's his story.
With the Blaine Amendment is it's also very contradictory to the preamble to the very Constitution that it exists within, which is to acknowledge Almighty God. How are we acknowledging Almighty God in the Constitution, and then anybody that acknowledges Almighty God actually cannot benefit from what the state is doing?
In 1890, Idaho also ratified a section into its constitution that threatens every Christian in the state today. Article 9, Section 5, the Blaine Amendment.
So the Blaine Amendment is an effort to make sure that there is a separation of what the state does in terms of its funding, in terms of its resources, and keep making sure that churches and religious organizations do not receive any benefit from public funding.
Neither the legislature or other public corporation shall ever make any appropriation or pay from any public fund anything in aid of a church.
We started as a church about 7 years ago in December, so we're right around that period of time now, and we began as a Bible study that was meeting in a home in Middleton. Longer story shorter is we actually ended up moving facilities quite often just to find different places that would fit us best. And many of those facilities were local public schools. We ended up at Sage International School, which is where really this story really begins. They were actually excited that we would actually rent from them. One of the ladies that we met with just immediately identified that we are so glad that you guys are here. Churches are the backbone of society. We received a phone call from one of the executives at the Sage International Schools, and just informing us that we are not going to be able to continue to allow us to be there. That they were being told that they were that their pursuit of expansion through the use of bond funding was something that prohibited us from continuing to rent from them. And we were also aware that there was another rent-paying customer that was renting the facility as a music school, outside music school, that was renting the facility for their lessons. And so we also learned that they were not required to leave, that they were allowed to continue to stay. And so that began really our own questioning. Why is this? Is it because we're a church? And really that's what came back as the answer was yes, that's why we were not able to be there. And that phone call from Sage was very cordial, was very nice, and very, very regrettable from their side. We're so sorry. They were saying, we don't want you to have to leave, but basically we're being told that if we want this bond funding, you have to leave. And they argued for it and argued for us on our behalf, but ultimately they got the answer, absolutely not. They have to go.
In September 2025, a federal judge ruled that Truth Family Bible Church's First Amendment rights were violated. But the Blaine Amendment still casts a shadow over Idaho's church bodies.
The Blaine Amendment, it was designed and was initiated to be discriminatory against Christians. Initially, of course, towards Roman Catholics, but also clearly it affects people beyond just the Roman Catholic tradition. It's also very contradictory to the preamble to the very Constitution that it exists within, which is to acknowledge Almighty God. How are we acknowledging Almighty God in the Constitution, and then anybody that acknowledges Almighty God actually cannot benefit from what the state is doing? And we see biblically the justification, the legitimacy of using your citizenship, using your rights to pursue justice. Paul appealed to his Roman citizenship and said, I appeal to Caesar, and he had the right to go before Caesar. A church is made of people who are citizens of a particular state and country. And so as those citizens, we are tax-paying citizens. I do agree that we ought not to have the state build churches with taxpayer funding. That's an inappropriate use of public funds. But yet, when we're talking about a tangential secondary benefit by living and existing in the state, being able to use public facilities that are funded with taxpayer money that the members of the church are as tax-paying citizens contributed to, it doesn't make sense then to discriminate on that basis. And so when we acknowledge God in our Constitution and then turn around and then say, you're not allowed to benefit from your own tax dollars, I think it's contradictory. And churches are made up of tax-paying citizens, and so the state ought to tread lightly on its citizens who are in fact religious, which is the founding of our own country, that we are one nation under God, and even the Idaho Constitution acknowledges that.
Folks, we need you to go to Blaine.idahopetitions.com. Sign the petition to repeal the Blaine Amendment. We need hundreds and hundreds, thousands and thousands of signatures. That story right there is unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable. And I want to bring Catherine Hartley back in here. Kate, thank you so much for taking on this case. I want to get to what the judge and how the decision came about, how you actually won this case. But first, I mean, this wasn't the first time, and I mentioned a few in my opening. This wasn't the first time that these ridiculous kind of things have happened to everyday people. I mean, this is a real problem. It is a systemic problem. Don't you agree?
Matt, it's a huge problem all over the nation. And time and time again, the Supreme Court, especially more recently, has multiple times said that states cannot use their Blaine Amendment to discriminate against religious people when the state is offering a benefit, and that religious person or that religious institution would otherwise qualify for that benefit. In 2017, for the first time, the Supreme Court pretty squarely dealt with the Blaine Amendment coming out of the state of Missouri in the Trinity Lutheran case. And in that case, there was a public benefit offered to preschools for their playground facilities, and a church was denied that benefit purely because it was a church. That should sound familiar from the documentary you just heard. And utilizing their Blaine Amendment said it forbade the funding from going to that church. And the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. And then pretty quickly after that, the Supreme Court dealt with two other Blaine Amendment cases involving the education setting. Espinoza case, which came out of the state of Montana, where the state of Montana utilized its Blaine Amendment to prohibit funding from going to families choosing a religious school.
We're going to have that. We're going to have that here in Idaho this year.
Right. Well, hopefully not.
We have the school, don't we? I mean, we have the school tax credit where parents can get a credit for sending their kids to something that costs money, like a private school or religious school.
Yes, and there is very, very clear precedent that the state cannot deny that benefit to anyone who is wanting to use that money at a religious school or for religious homeschool materials, whatever it may be.
Right.
And so, and again, they had to follow up. The state of Maine did the same thing as the state of Montana, utilizing their Blaine Amendment in the Carson case. And so the theme from this is it keeps happening. It keeps happening
exactly
over and over again. It happened to Truth Family Bible Church. Matt, that documentary was great, by the way. It was a pleasure to work with Danny and represent his church. And I'm so happy with the result of it. But people like Danny were punished in the state of Idaho. And so this keeps happening, which I believe is why we need to repeal it entirely.
Right. Let's bring Representative Elaine Price in here if she's ready to go. Hi, Representative Price from District 4, Coeur d'Alene. Good to see you here. I want to ask you too. I mean, why do our citizens have to continuously keep going through this if the courts keep knocking it down? Why can't we fix this? Why does it keep happening? I mean, are there other than repealing the Blaine Amendment? Could you write rules or send memos, strongly worded memos to agencies that they can't do this?
Hi, Matt. Thank you for having me, and Happy New Year to both of you.
Thank you.
We looked at repealing the Blaine Amendment previously, and it was interesting. Some of the comments that we got back was that we still have the Blaine Amendment on the books. So until Idaho has their own court cases, then we really shouldn't repeal the Blaine Amendment. Well,
now we have them.
Yes, exactly. And in my opinion, I think this is the only way to fix it, is to actually repeal it, because it continually gets used and referenced because it's on, quote unquote, on the books or in the Constitution. So the only way to really fix it, because obviously these court cases haven't affected things, because here we have a perfect example that they're still using the Blaine Amendment as the reason to discriminate against Christians.
Right.
So in my opinion, repealing it is the only option.
And I can't imagine if Pastor Danny Standmeyer knew the precedent that the Blaine Amendment was being knocked down all over the country, that he could have just simply went and said, oh, well, precedent shows that what you're doing is illegal, so you can't do it, and that the government would have backed down. Of course they wouldn't have. They would have. They pursue. They never stop. They never stop. I mean, that's why we need to get rid of this. Real quick, guys, go ahead and throw the QR code up at the top again. That QR code will take you to blaine.idahopetitions.com so that you can sign the petition. So we're going to leave that up throughout the show. Just whip out your phone if you're watching on television, whatever you're doing, or go to the website and sign the petition there. But we'll leave that up throughout the program. So back to this, Kate. What did our judge in Idaho say when this case with Truth Family Bible Church reached him? Was it the same excuse or reason?
Yeah. So in this case, we actually had 3 challenges under the First Amendment. So it was a violation of the church's free exercise rights. It was a violation of the Establishment Clause, and a violation of their free speech rights. So we actually had 3 First Amendment claims. Thankfully, we were successful on all 3 of those claims. And essentially, yes, the fundamental problem here, as you've alluded to, is the text of the Blaine Amendment is entirely contradictory to the First Amendment. And again, which is why we keep running into all of these cases that pop up all over the country, and the Supreme Court continually has to deal with this. And I agree with Representative Price that repealing it is very crucial, because there is, at a minimum, even if we're giving the government the benefit of the doubt, there's confusion as to whether or not to apply First Amendment precedent with what is in the text of the Blaine Amendment. And these government entities are tasked with making decisions that comply with federal and state law. And in doing so, they say, okay, there's this federal precedent, but there's also this state level constitutional provision that we also are supposed to comply with. And so at a bare minimum, it creates a lot of confusion. And I think that is ultimately what happened to Truth Family Bible Church. We have no evidence that there was specific hostility towards the church, but there was a lot of confusion because the Blaine Amendment is sitting there, and they are believing that they need to utilize it. So back to our case, we had a great ruling from our judge here in federal court in Idaho, and said yes, that utilizing the Idaho Blaine Amendment in the way that they did against Truth Family Bible Church violated the Establishment Clause, violated their free exercise rights, and violated their free speech rights. And so very, very thankful for that win.
Yeah, I mean, very good. So back to you, Representative Price. Now we have a case in Idaho. We might have some other cases bubbling up as well. What's going to be the process? What can you do at the legislative level?
Well, we are going to try to repeal the Blaine Amendment again, but the problem is that we only pass legislation to leave it up to the people if they want to decide to repeal the Blaine Amendment. Legislature does not repeal the Blaine Amendment. We put it out to the people to decide whether that's what they want to do or not. So the first step is us getting a House or a joint resolution passed, putting a provision on the ballot whether the people want to repeal the Blaine Amendment or not. So we're just the first step in putting it to the people to allow the people to decide. So that's the plan.
So in essence, you could have legislators who may not agree with repealing the Blaine Amendment, but they could agree with saying, you know what, let's let the people decide, right?
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely. And that's the step that hopefully will take this legislative session, is getting the resolution passed so the people can decide.
Yeah, I truly think once people realize what's going on, because this isn't about, the government directly funding and building private religious schools. This is not what this is about. This is about the case that we just saw with Pastor Danny, or all the other ones. I mean, that case out of Washington about the blind man who wanted to be a pastor and was stuck in the court system for years, so he had to wash dishes at the medical lab. Like, that is comical. That's like I mean, it's so sad. It's so sad. It'd be hilarious if it wasn't true. That sort of thing. Okay. Well, Elaine, will people signing petitions and us delivering them to the body, will that help?
That's a good question. There's a lot of misconceptions around the Blaine Amendment, and it's been touched on a little bit on the separation of church and state, the fact that the state's going to open religious schools now. The School of Satan's going to open a school now. Little did they know, I probably shouldn't be saying this out loud, they can already under the law, Right. So they can't be discriminated against any more than anybody else. Right. So it's breaking down those misconceptions on what would happen if the Blaine Amendment were to go away. It's going to be a challenge. We faced it when we looked at this legislation previously. And, the misconception that because we pass this legislation means that Blaine Amendment goes away too. That's not what happens. This puts it on the ballot so the people can decide. So, yes, petitions maybe to help people understand that there's people want to have the option.
Yeah. They
want to be given that choice. And right now they don't have that choice at all. So,
yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Representative. Ms. Hartley, I want to give you the final word here. What's your best pitch? What should we be telling folks? Where should we get them more information on what the Blaine Amendment really means? I mean, what is a couple of lines that we can all share?
I think one way to think about it is try to transfer the concept of the Blaine Amendment to a different area. For example, what if our state constitution said that, no public funding could go towards any African Americans? Say we put race in there, or sex. If you are female, you cannot have any public funding that the state may offer. That would really wake people up, I believe, and I think that our society has really gone after discrimination in other areas, again, which is a good thing. But we have not gone after it with the same vigor related to people of faith and religion. And so that is a way to pitch it, I believe, to say, this is discrimination just like any other discrimination is. And it's been going on too long. It's harming everyday people, such as Pastor Danny, such as homeschool families in this state. Many other people and many other examples. And so let's finally go after this with the same vigor that we have other types of discrimination.
Yeah, great. And I would love for Idaho to be first in the nation on this. This would be awesome. I mean, this is what this would show everybody what Idaho is really truly about, especially when it comes to this kind of blatant bigotry. Thank you so much for doing all the hard work here. And I'm glad you were able to make it on today. And we will definitely follow up with you. Good luck next week as the session opens, Representative. And we'll talk to you soon as well, Catherine.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot. Folks, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. We have one more special guest. Stay tight.
exactly what happened. You want to pull the tape? You can pull the tape because we now got video.
All Idaho lawmakers swear an oath to support the Idaho and U.S. constitutions. But how's that working out for you? Because not all Idaho lawmakers share the same values. That's where the Citizens Alliance of Idaho pledge comes in. 10 statements inspired by those two founding documents that are designed to preserve our shared values. Values such as education freedom, safeguarding free speech, defending our protected right to self-defense, and being responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars. When a lawmaker signs the pledge, they are performing an act of political courage, accepting the challenge to be a champion for our values, and serving with political integrity. To find out if your lawmaker signed the pledge, visit idahopledge.com. Paid for by Citizens Alliance of Idaho. We ride together.
We certainly do. If you missed the documentary that we played, we will be releasing it right after the end of this broadcast. It'll be available on the on YouTube and Rumble for you to watch again, to share, and to get people noticed. I want to introduce Caleb Pierce. He is from the Idaho Family Policy Center. He is the Legal Center Director. Caleb, welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us. I want to ask you, I want to get to, like, how did we get to this point in our society where this Blaine Amendment is running all over the place?
Well, first, Matt, thanks so much for having me on. I think that when you look at kind of the historical basis for the Blaine Amendment, it's kind of like you highlighted earlier. It was based in kind of the early progressive movement across America, based in a lot of anti-Catholic bigotry, really. And in Idaho specifically, if you look at the historical record, was also based in largely anti-Mormon sentiments as well. At the time, you had laws that prohibited Mormons from voting. Those laws are off the books, but this one still remains, right? This provision in Idaho's Constitution that's openly hostile towards religion, and that's not really what the people who put it in place thought of it as, right? What was often considered for most of these Blaine amendments was, prohibitions on sectarian type purposes, and for most of the early founders, right, they viewed that as, prohibiting certain denominational divides. But as our society and as government has increasingly secularized, you see an increase in efforts to wield this and weaponize it against Christians, to say that the Christians can't participate in government programs that others can, and to provide an open discrimination, open hostility towards Christians, that I think is a result of the kind of increasing secularization that you see of society after the progressive era in America, as the kind of bedrock institutions that formed American culture, the family and the church, have been steadily eroded and replaced with either chaos or the state.
So, okay, that's great. So the fear that people are having, of course, is that, like, you get rid of this and all of a sudden we're going to establish a religion in Idaho or in the country. Two things. One, what does it actually mean to establish a religion, and how does it differ from what the Pilgrims ran away from, at the Church of England when they escaped Europe to come to the new world, right? And what would that look like today?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. One, I think the kind of actual establishment of religion that the founders were talking about was establishment of an official state church, right? That you're compelled to go to, you're compelled to give your tithe money to. And that's certainly not what many of the founders had in mind, especially at the federal level, though, right? When we talk about establishment of religion, the First Amendment talks about it in terms of Congress shall make no establishment of religion. And that, I think, is key, because even after the Constitution was ratified and you had kind of early America, you still had state churches. But I think that's something that, like, is not particularly helpful, and it's not what the founders envisioned, right? But what the founders did envision is they envision a society that's based upon Christian values, a society that recognizes the basis of our law and our civilization, and that's entirely distinct from the concept of establishment of religion. And it's also, like I said earlier, right, when the founders who established Idaho came here, they had in mind a state that honored Christian principles. Many of the early founders and settlers were missionaries, people like Henry Spalding, people who developed the state. And you read through the Constitutional Convention debates, you can see that they didn't have an animus towards faith. They actually understood it was necessary not only for society but for government. But this kind of idea of establishing a state church is distinct. It's different. It's wholly separate from the idea that our law should be based on moral truth rather than based on kind of the mob collective mentality that has been emblematic of regimes like the French Revolution and the Soviet Union. What you see as regimes become devoid of any sort of moral principles, that's where you see issues. And the founders understood that.
Yeah, so true. I mean, okay, so we're talking about changing the Constitution in Idaho, though, right? And that's like a very big deal. And so, we've talked when I was talking with Representative Price and Catherine Hartley about the precedent, court precedent, there's tradition and all this stuff. When it comes down to just talking to our neighbors, our friends, our families about this, what do you see as a great path forward here on how to have these conversations?
Yeah, that's a great question, Matt. I think that, like you said, changing the state constitution is a big hurdle, and it should be. But our state constitution, through the Blaine Amendment, has a provision that has enshrined open hostility towards our faith, right? Towards Christianity, towards religion, and it's you see examples of the types of kind of subtle religious discrimination that are prevalent, right? But this is like even worse, right? Because it's enshrined in our most fundamental law of our state constitution. And the only places that you see that level of open hostility towards religion are the types of countries that we could count off naming internationally that are very hostile to religion, places that no Christian would want to live. But we here in Idaho, a state where you have many people of faith that forms the basis of our communities and our shared heritage, that is here. It's in our Constitution, and we have the chance to repeal that. And that's something that I think people should consider when they're thinking about this issue.
Okay, well, you follow the legislature pretty closely. Final question: the upcoming, session, the landscape of where Idaho is at, all of the different things that are going on. I'm wondering if the legislature has the appetite to tackle this, to take it on. I think about the Charlie Kirk assassination and what it's done to young people, and we're seeing a huge revival among young people when it comes to Christianity in particular. And I'm just wondering, do we have to wait until they get into office for this to happen, or can it happen now?
Yeah, you mentioned the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and I think for most people in my generation and in our generation, it's that's one of the most pivotal moments, right? It's something that we'll all remember, and it's something that, like you said, has impacted a lot of people for sure. I am really grateful to be living in Idaho and to have the legislature that we do. I can't read the tea leaves and predict how things will go, but I will say that we have a lot of legislators who are faithful and understand the founders and who recognize the importance of faith for our communities, and I'm really grateful for that. And I think we'll see what happens. I'll certainly follow this and see what happens. But I think that you do see a shifting in the tide among culture. You see people that are recognizing that their faith here at home is now being questioned, not only by the culture around them, but even by the government, right, through provisions like the Blaine Amendment, something that the U.S. Supreme Court has recognized over and over again, can be used against believers and people of faith. And so I think it's a long time that we make sure that our state law doesn't provide the sorts of hostility against religion that we wouldn't even dream to think of anywhere else.
Yeah. There it is, folks. Go ahead and look it up, and then scan that QR code to go over and sign the petition to repeal the Blaine Amendment. Caleb, thanks so much for joining us. This is your first time on the Idaho Signal. Where can people follow you? Where do we follow what you're up to, and all sorts of that jazz?
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to be on, Matt. Yeah, people can find me personally. I'm on most social media. I'm on X at Caleb for Idaho. And then you can follow our work here that we do at the Idaho Family Policy Center by going to our website, following us on our social media. We're on X at Idaho FPC. One of the ways that it's great for people to stay in touch is we have our action alert emails. You can sign up for our email list on our website. We send out updates on what's happening during legislative session, ways in which people can be involved. Those are great ways to follow what we're doing. And then we host events throughout the state, throughout the year. So anybody's welcome to come to our events. We'd love to have you.
Excellent. All right, Caleb Pierce, thanks so much for joining us. I'm sure we'll have you back during the session as well. Take care. And God bless you for your work.
Thanks, Matt. You too.
All right. Okay, folks. That's our time here. That's the QR code, wherever it was over there. That's the QR code. Idaho, put it up to also blaine.idahopetitions.com. That's where we need you to go sign the petition. We need to get as many names on that. Share it around, send it around. It's super, super easy, super quick. The page is right there. It tells you everything that's going to go on. We're going to add the documentary to the page as well now that it's up there. And please do share that documentary. You'll find it on our Rumble and YouTube page and Facebook as well. So that'll easily be shareable and get people on board. The last thing I want to let you off with here is, and Caleb said it succinctly there, the Charlie Kirk assassination has really affected a lot of people, and we are no different here at Citizens Alliance of Idaho. In particular, and also with the guys here at Idaho Signal. We're doubling down, folks. We're doubling down. I have a real good friend online, Kira Davis, and she said it the best. She said, we sent you Charlie, the nicest guy, the sweetest guy, the most reasonable guy. He was the most reasonable among us. We sent him to you to have dialogue, to talk through the issues. And you shot him. And so now you get the rest of us, and you're going to choke on it. So we're coming. We're not slowing down. We're doubling down. I hope you're out there with me. I hope you're ready to ride together. One of the things that I can also ask you to do is we have our pledge. And right now I'm super, super pumped to say we have 42 out of the 105 legislators have signed the Citizens Alliance of Idaho pledge. They are currently in good standing heading into the new session. But we're going to put the pressure on Representative Jeff Ehlers. Throw that up. Representative Jeff Ehlers, we'd love for you to join by signing the Citizens Alliance of Idaho pledge. If you scan that QR code, we're going QR code heavy this season too. If you scan that QR code, it's going to open up an email right in your phone, and you send an email directly to him. All you have to do is scan it, click send, and the email goes off, and it asks, you can change the message if you want. And it's just asking Representative Jeff Ehlers out of Meridian to sign the pledge. We need people on the record, folks. It's about being on the record. You may have a great voting record. You may be known as a conservative in your district, but we need people on the record. It just puts us at ease. It just allows us to then focus our energy on those who are unwilling to sign, those who fail to live up to what the pledge stands for and these values. We've been playing ads for you throughout the program that talk about the values that we're trying to preserve. And when you have 42 out of the 105 legislators who have signed this pledge and said, yeah, I'm for this stuff and I'm for it, and I'll stand up for it, We need to gather as many as we can. And Representative Jeff Ehlers, I know you can jump on board this. And so we are asking all of you to contact Jeff Ehlers right now. If you have him on social media, if you have him as his own email, but we've made it super simple here to just scan that QR code. It'll open up an email and you're ready to go. If you haven't noticed, folks, this show is all about action. It's not about you sitting behind the screen here and just enjoying the program. I certainly am not here to entertain. I know I'm not that entertaining to begin with, but it's about action. So when you show up to Idaho Signal, we cut through the noise and it's all about action. I want you to avoid the noise and do nothing but pay attention to the signal. We will see you back here next week at our regular time. Thank you so much for joining us. God bless you. Take care.
And that's exactly what happened. You want to pull the tape? You can pull the tape because we now got video. This bill, I think, it puts a stake in the ground that says we have a sovereign right to protect what's ours.